Humility, equity, anti-racism, lateral kindness, inclusivity, and trauma-informed. These are key aspects that we as a collective are asked to bring into our everyday lives, our work lives, so we can share space with each other, with humility, with kindness. I'm so excited to bring in amazing voices, social change leaders in the Prince George area, so that together we can hear about why it matters, what got them interested in what they represent in the community, and maybe even some tips for other leaders in the community of how to best serve all people. I'm really looking forward to this journey together.
Everyone, please welcome Auroara Leigh. She's going to talk about her guest topic, which is humility. I'd also like to introduce Lake Atlas. Their topic is equity. Shri Chai. Her topic is anti-racism. Stacey Yates. Their topic is lateral kindness. Misha Slugaki. Her topic is inclusivity. Shirley Hogan, and her topic is trauma-informed. So now I'm going to go through and ask each panelist the first question. So, Auroara Leigh, your topic is humility. The very first question I have for you is please introduce yourself and your role in the community.
Thank you. So I already introduced myself. I'm Auroara Leigh, and I did this video podcast series with the support of TELUS. And my role in the community is that I just want to help serve while I'm here in the North in a way that can inspire hope and healing. And I think it's simple as that. Sometimes we make it a little more complicated than it needs to be. Normalize talking about healing.
Why is your topic a big part of your work and how you represent that in the North?
Thank you. So I think that I try to walk my talk. So I spent some time as a Stopping the Violence counselor for women, and I realized that I needed to take a giant step back and actually go and charge my abuser. And so I did that. And I think that I did that through also channeling that as a musical artist and in my albums, and how I overcame and faced that. And it was very hard. It was very hard to do. But I needed to in order to understand why women don't come forward often. And then I started to realize, the importance of how society itself blankets women and supports women as they go through that as well. And so I think that I just really try to be a role model. That would answer that part of the question. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for that. Lake Atlas, please introduce yourself and your role in the community.
My name is Lake. My pronouns are he, him. My role in the community, I I work as a youth peer support. So that's really just supporting youth in whatever capacity that they need from me. I sort of meet them where they're at. And yeah, just being there and being who I am and supporting them in a way that counts. And yeah, recognizing my own limits. Yeah, that's my role.
Why is equity a big part of your work, and how do you represent that in the North?
I would say that I have a lot of intersectionalities where I have a lot of barriers in a lot of different ways, and that's very unique to me and to who I am, and that informs how I do my work, and it makes me, it gives me like a unique perspective. What was the second part of the question?
And then the second part is, why is your topic a big part of your work? And then how do you represent that as part of your role and person in the community in the North?
How do I represent that? Yeah, I guess just being true to myself and making sure that I recognize, as I said earlier, my own limits and recognizing that we all play a part in healing and we all play a part in bettering the community. It's not just me, we all play a part in that. Yeah, just recognizing my own biases and learning from that and learning from other people's perspectives.
That's perfect. Cherie, your topic is anti-racism, so please introduce yourself and then your role in the community.
Hello, I'm Sherry. I'm an immigrant here in Canada since 2018, and I'm from Singapore and Malaysia. My ethnicity is Chinese and Thai, Southeast Asian. Currently, I'm a settler on the territory of the Lately Tene, and I run a small social enterprise startup called Speak Right Academy, where I organize community events which bring people together to learn and promotes the linguistic diversity of the community. And also currently I work for the School District 57 Indigenous Education, and in my role I work with the elders to teach the Dakas language in the school district.
How does your topic of anti-racism a big part of your work, and how do you represent that?
In my community programs, I always try to promote diversity and promote the beauty of it, and how we can all help each other to maintain that diversity in our community.
Stacy, please introduce yourself and your role in the community.
Hello, I'm Stacey Yates. I've grown up in this community, born and raised here. My mother's from here, my father's from Ontario. I've had the privilege of getting to watch this community change over the last few decades that I've been here, and found myself in a transformation. I'm a pediatric critical care nurse by trade. I have worked with a lot of children and families, and I am a very passionate advocate. I had a look at some of the families that I've been working with over time and found myself very frustrated by the system and feeling that it was highly inequitable and that there were lots of people who were disempowered by the system. And in my own sense of justice, I've decided to go upstream and try to be an active participant in trying to make change for our children and families in the North. And it's kind of evolved over time and in that role.
Yeah, that's perfect. Stacy, what is your topic of lateral kindness? Why is it a big part of your work, and how do you represent that in the North?
Working as a nurse in acute care in particular, nursing has a huge history and instance of lateral violence. The nurse to nurse and nurse to other health professional lack of kindness and harm that happens in our health professions is huge. Lateral kindness is kind of the antidote to that, I believe. I've tried to practice that my whole life, not knowing that there was a potential label for what I was doing and how I chose to show up. But I believe that by being kind to other people, whether it's the patients and families I work with, or my colleagues, or the students that we're in contact with, that we can have a massive revolutionary change within healthcare and within our communities to just be nice to other people, to change the environment, to improve care, because people are nicer, they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel cared for, they feel important, and we treat others the same way. So I try and model that.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. We're all going to need care at some point, so I'm thankful that you're there. Misha, please introduce yourself and your role in the community.
My name is Misha Slagaki. I'm a mental health and addiction recovery worker here in Prince George. I did grow up just like Stacy here in Prince George as well. When I was 18, I moved to Alberta, kind of moved to a smaller town outside of Calgary and Edmonton. And I kind of saw that barrier in those communities, in the Indigenous communities there, as well as here, having learned all of that stuff. I moved back after 10 years and saw a lot of that has not changed. There's some slow progression, but it's still that generations of needing to unlearn and include people in the conversations that are needing to be included, and not disregarding what they went through and how those processes have happened throughout generations, including in my own family. And I think that's why, like myself, I try to practice in that inclusion piece, and I try to practice in with my clients, a well-rounded system, and it's still unlearning. I think we still need to unlearn a lot of things. I know with my family as well, it's educating them in the processes. There's addiction and trauma in my own family, and it's taking that time to heal for ourselves too. I think we need to recognize that so many of us have been through a lot, and you know, so much. I think with residential schools, with the Holocaust, the whatever it may be that a lot of generations have gone through, and we need to kind of look back and reflect. And I think that's a big key into why I do what I do.
That feels really heart-centered. I think you kind of already covered this, but I'm just going to ask you it again anyway. Why is your topic of inclusivity a big part of your work, and how do you represent that in the North?
Because I want to see change. I'm still seeing such a broken system, especially at our levels of government, and we need to bring awareness in that process, and have them learn as well, and not disrespect to government officials, but I mean, we do need to look and delve deeper into what causes us that uncomfortability, and why they won't have those conversations. And I think for me, it's why I'm so passionate about it, is because it's an education piece that needs to continue.
That's perfect. Thank you for your work. Shirley, please introduce yourself and your role in the community.
Thank you. My name is Shirley Hogan, and I work for Canadian Mental Health Association as the Manager of Education and Training. I am here today just representing on myself, but that is what I do in the community.
I love it. Thank you for being here. Why is your topic of trauma-informed a big part of your work, and how do you represent that in the North?
Trauma-informed is such an important part of my work because a lot of what I do is I educate on mental health, and I educate on suicide awareness, and I educate on these really, especially historically difficult and sort of taboo subjects. But so often at the base of all of that is someone's experience with trauma. And so being able to just remember that, when we think about traumatic experiences, most all people have experienced something that could be considered a traumatic experience. And many of those people will have a traumatic response because of that. And so we don't know we can't see from the outside who might be affected. We can't tell what somebody is feeling just by looking at them usually. And so it's really important that whenever doing any type of work or education with folks, that just remembering, I don't know, but they might be hurting, right? And so want to make sure that just doing everything in the most gentle and supportive way that we can, so that we can help them heal that hurt.
Aurora, what was the hardest challenge that led you to the turning point for you that allowed you to learn about the topic of humility?
I wrote these questions. You'd think I would have prepped for this one. So I have an ACE score of 9 out of 10. So that's adverse childhood experiences. I didn't really learn what that meant until after university. I didn't understand why, as I was learning in university about health, psychology, the impacts of colonization, everything I was learning. I didn't understand why sometimes I had to take a day off after going to classes. I didn't understand, but I pushed through because I had a little girl. I had a little girl that I wanted to make sure that I knew and had the capacity to equip her. And that drove me forward. And I continued to, seek supports in areas. And I thought maybe once I enter the workforce as well, these dedicated people in nonprofits, dedicated people in institutions, saying the words, saying the things that they say they care for. And then I'd look for the embodiment of that. And I wasn't always finding the embodiment of that. I'd find the treasures. I'd find this beautiful heart-centered folks doing the work and staying committed, but they would start to burn out because they weren't being supported to do the work all the time. Or in academia, heart-centered people would get heart-centered academics would get let go because they couldn't follow suit with the system. You know, I kept seeing these things. Meanwhile, there's people dying, suicide, overdose, really close people to me too. And I would grieve. I'd say, we have the research. We don't even need more research. We already know. We already know what's needed. Why isn't it getting brought to the ground level? Why are people still suffering? Why are we doing all this research if it's not helping? And I didn't understand, right? My neurodivergent mind, I'm neurodivergent. It's one of my intersectionalities. And I didn't understand because, you know, if you say it, it's supposed to happen. I'm confused. Someone tell me why it's not happening. And so I dug deeper and I kept digging. And then I thought, well, what kind of solution can I be to help to bridge some of that, even in a small way? My turning point, I mean, the death of, you know, my partner, the death of my best friend, but still needing to make sure that my daughter could be safe in the world. Those were like the biggest challenges for me, you know, wanting her, a First Nations and Métis female in the world, to be safe, because I knew what it was like to not be safe. I really see the potential. I see the potential the world could have in implementing change. When I just went to the Mental Health and Addiction Symposium, and all of those officiates and subject matter experts in those fields admit the system's broken. They admit that it's connection that's needed to heal mental health and addictions. I see the possibility, but I wonder about how can we just all steer together in the same direction and choose what our shared values are now so that we can move forward in that direction for love and connection, because we know that's the fire. We spend so much time treating the smoke, so many resources treating the smoke. But if we know that that's the fire, what can we do to make that a reality?
Lake, what was the tipping point in your life for you to allow yourself to learn more about the topic of equity?
That is a big question. The tipping point, learning the terms for how I identified. For a long time, I knew that I was queer, but I didn't have the terminology for that. Just learning how I identified and how that impacted me and how that impacted how I interact with the people around me and the world around me, informed how I view equity and how I treat others. Yeah.
How did your experience of life strengthen your expertise in that area?
I spoke a little bit about it in the first question, just how like all my intersectionalities meet with each other. You know, how I do my job, but also just who I am and how I interact with people in the world.
That's perfect. It's great. Cherie, what was the hardest challenge that led to the turning point for you that allowed you to learn about the topic of anti-racism?
My background from Singapore and Malaysia. I was born in Malaysia and as a Chinese, so I grew up watching my family facing issues as a minority race in that country. And then when I was 12, my family immigrated to Singapore. So firsthand, I experienced being an immigrant in Singapore, the xenophobia. So I would say that from a very young age, I got to know about these topics. And then now immigrating to Canada once again and having a half Chinese son, I faced some racism in the systems here, like medical system, for example. So it's like I have autoimmune issues. So that really struck me that something's got to change, because I want to make sure that, and also for the language, I really want to make sure that my son speaks his language, Mandarin, and hopefully Cantonese. But that's why I start really reflecting and researching and getting to know to learn more about this topic, and it really opened my mind. So yeah.
That's perfect. If you care to elaborate, or you don't need to, how did that experience strengthen your expertise in the area of anti-racism?
Right. Wouldn't say that I'm an expert in anti-racism, but because there's so much to learn, and I'm definitely not an expert, but I've learned a lot, and I've learned a lot from others. So I stand on the shoulders of giants. So they have taught me, and I pass on the knowledge to others. So yeah, I'm always learning. Yeah, merci.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. Stacy, what was the hardest challenge that led to you to a turning point for you that allowed you to learn about the topic of lateral kindness, and how did that experience strengthen your expertise in that area?
I'm not sure if there's one particular incident as much as it is kind of a consistent trajectory. I feel like coming into nursing, I made a choice to kind of show up for families. I worked with some senior citizens when I was a teenager, and I loved being able to build relationships with their families and knowing the important role I played in their families, even though I wasn't. I was another consistent person for them and eventually became a part of how they viewed their family. And that felt really privileged to me. I really enjoyed that and the reciprocal pieces of the relationships. I think unknowingly, I probably chose healthcare because of what my early childhood experience was. And I think that part of that is in being able to give the care to other people in a safe way, safe for myself, and that I'm not vulnerable in that situation, but to give the care to others as I should have received. So it's almost like a self-healing process over time. And I think that that seems to be a continuous line through my life. I am an adult diagnosed ADHD. I went through my whole life not knowing what that was like, but I knew I was always different. I knew I didn't fit in, and I knew I was never really truly accepted. And so, kind of moving through the path of my career, whether it's in acceptance in healthcare with families and patients at the bedside, or nursing students, and making sure that they feel supported when they're in education, or whether it's our learners and being open about who I am and what my experience is, gives them permission to also be themselves and show up authentically and build better, closer relationships with our patients and their families and the people in their lives, to feel like they can kind of step into who they are, and kind of share their love and kindness and light with the world in a really authentic way. That's kind of been a healing process for me as well, as I kind of learn how to do this myself. I've gained so much in meeting other people who are trying to walk the same journey and showing up in their authenticity, but also in the reciprocal pieces I'm learning from my students. I'm open to what they have to teach me, and I get that benefit as I'm learning along with them. I'm getting to learn in the community and making amazing connections and deepening my understanding, and then being able to share that with other people. And then also having the students feel like they are seen and heard in their experience. And that's really validating for me, in also allowing to be a piece of their journey to figure out who they are and do the same for others.
Okay, Misha, what was the hardest challenge that led you to the turning point in your life that allowed you to learn about the topic of inclusivity, and how did that experience strengthen your expertise in that area?
For myself personally, I would say it's an accumulation of things in my personal life and what I've seen and witnessed, and how I wanted that to change. I started off in healthcare when I worked in Alberta, transitioned to working with youth in care, and then now working with adults with mental health and addiction issues. And I think seeing that from all perspectives, and having gone through that myself and being ostracized, being a daughter of an immigrant, and a family coming from Poland, and judgment, and then seeing that still kind of placing today in the world, and why, like, I see it in all aspects, whether it's in the in the 2S LGBTQ plus, in the, you know, in the Indigenous communities within our own communities, and wanting that to change, and hoping that that changes. I think we see so much exclusion because we look different. I remember when my cousin, she maybe was like 9-10 years old, and she's half Indigenous and half Polish, and she, you know, I'm 12 years older than her, and she came to me and she was crying, and she's telling me that, you know, she didn't belong. She didn't belong anywhere. And that to me broke my heart because, you know, she's going to hate me for saying this, but she's my Kuschelberry, and she, you know, and for me that was something that I realized that there needed to be change. And until we kind of bring forth and include and have that inclusivity and have those conversations and have all those monument moments and have the right, and this is where I, you know, I emphasize on this, the right individuals, the people that have the lived experiences actually being taken seriously, those changes will never happen. And for me, it's so vitally important.
Perfect answer. Thank you very much. Shirley, what is the hardest challenge that led you to the turning point that allowed you to learn about the topic of being trauma informed, and how did that experience strengthen your expertise in that area?
So I also have a very high ACEs score, and although I can share that today and I don't feel any shame or sort of sadness from that, there were many, many, many years where I was unable to talk about that. Right, like I was unable to be able to share that. I was a fear of judgment. I was just so many fears and insecurities that I had around you know, some of the events that had happened to me as a child. And then even when I was, you know, in my 20s, you know, I couldn't really talk about what had happened to me, but I knew that I knew something wasn't right with me, right? I knew I needed some kind of help, and I didn't have the confidence to know how to get that. So I went and volunteered at the crisis center thinking that I'll learn how to help other people and I'll just turn that around and put that on myself and I should be good then, right? I don't need to, no one needs to know, it can be my secret. And you know, so I tried to do that, and I, you know, like I did a pretty good job of that for a few years, and then I had an employment there. I was employed there for 10 years, so talking, like, just really immersed in other people's trauma. And you know, it wasn't until you know, quite a few years later when my secret had to come out, and I ended up in recovery, and then was able to sort of really share those stories and hear other people's stories. And you know, even though I'd been hearing people's stories already for years, because mine was still a secret, I really couldn't identify with theirs in the same way. And as soon as I was able to say, you know what, this doesn't have to be a secret for me anymore, I think that you know, I think I was pretty good before at being able to, you know, sort of understand what was going on for other people and support them. Once I was able to have that love and kindness for me, right? For a long time, I could give it to other people, but I really didn't know how to do it for me. I think that was really the big turning point, right? Learning how to be able to do that, how to share my story with other people, and then allow me to hear their stories in a very different way, right? Because then I was able to relate to them. I wasn't trying to just fix them. And I think that really has really fueled my really strong passion to be able to say that, you know what, we're all okay, right? We're all just perfectly unperfect, just perfectly the way we are unperfect, right? None of us are doing this. There's no award at the end, right? There's no award at the end. It's, and you know, I just love that saying that every single one of us up until today has 100% success rate, 100% success rate of handling and managing and getting through bad days and bad times. And I think we want to be able to celebrate that.
It's a perfect answer. Shirley, what are the best ways community can come together to heal it?
I think that the best way, I think just coming together, right? I think just starting. I think that if we can just start where we are, and when we think about the best ways, I just love what we've heard already around the idea of love and kindness and acceptance. And if we can sort of be able to just allow each other to just be ourselves, take our masks off, and just be the people that we are. It's amazing. I think I remember hearing Oprah Winfrey say it, but I'm sure someone else said it even before her, is that we're way more alike than we are different. Right? It's just that we never actually share what's going on, and we get so often so stuck in our stories and in our persona and who we think that we're supposed to be and making sure we're doing it right, that it puts that barrier up. And so, yeah, I think that that's just the number one. And, I also think that as soon as we can have that support, in order to have that courage, in order to be able to share our stories, then I think that that's where the healing starts, right? Healing starts when people feel heard. And, yeah, just allowing those safe spaces where we can do that and we can just be ourselves. I think that's how we start to heal it.
A rising tide raises all ships. Misha, what are the best ways community can come together to heal it?
I think learning from our mistakes, learning to open our minds, to grow, to educate others, and having that passion behind it as well, and not being afraid to make those mistakes, and recognizing those mistakes and holding ourselves accountable. I think that's a big key piece, is the accountability. We're humans, things will happen. We're going to continuously make mistakes throughout all of that. But I think it's that accountability and being adaptable to grow. And that's where we can make the changes in community. Because if we can't learn to be accountable and grow within ourselves, we can't make those changes and share that within communities.
Stacey, what are the best ways community can come together to heal it?
As you ask these questions, I keep forgetting the answers because I get nervous every time. So I've written them down this time. Okay, so from my perspective, what I think is it starts with education. Whether we're teaching our students or teaching and learning ourselves about things like ACEs, so adverse childhood experiences, about the prevalence of them, how they can be really overt and traumatic, or they can be really small and sneaky over time, and having lots of those, how they impact your overall health and well-being throughout your lifespan. Whether it's impacts on things like chronic disease and development of cancer, or whether it's impacts on your relationships, be them intimate or professional, from things like attachment and how you're going to connect or disconnect within your relationships, what that impact has on your overall experience and perspective of your life and your own experiences, and the fact that they're different for everyone. I think having that perspective and context changes everything. I think that if we start implementing this understanding in the mainstream in education, particularly in my field with healthcare through all disciplines, I think that we show up differently because we have the opportunity to build understanding of ourselves and others, which gives us the opportunity to be curious and open and learn and grow ourselves and allow other people the same when they have the opportunity to just be themselves, to unmask, to let some of those pieces go and know that it is safe to do so. When they receive compassion, it's a healing experience for you and for someone else, and it trickles down throughout all areas of your life. Realistically, I think all of us as humans just want to be safe, seen, and heard, validated in our experiences, to know that they are valuable and valid, and that we are valuable and valid in our lives. And I think that that is the freeing part. So while it shows up in practice, for healthcare, it looks like trauma-informed practice or trauma-informed care. And then we can practice being trauma informed in the rest of our lives and all of our interactions, coming in with this understanding that we've all had experiences that impact our lives, no matter the severity. Trauma is trauma. Your body doesn't understand it to be anything except that. It's a nervous system thing, and it impacts how we move through the world.
Human experience is meant to be experienced. Feel it to heal it. Cherie, what are the best ways communities can come together to heal it?
They have pointed out really good points. I second all that they have said. For example, I really believe that the community can come together to learn. And then I also, from different backgrounds, so they learn from each other. And also what she said about learning from your mistakes, that's very important. And also education. And education is always the key, because especially when you teach the young people from the schools, it normalizes talking about this kind of topics at a young age. But one more big thing that came up when I thought about was the accessibility to the resources and the education, because sometimes you can have a lot of grassroots initiatives and community events, but some people may not be having the accessibility piece to actually benefit from it. So we as a community have to think about that. Like, for example, is there some kind of barrier, like for maybe working mothers or working parents, they're so busy, they may not have that time to go for such a learning experience. So what can we do maybe to offer childcare while they're also learning, right? While they're learning, they put their child with them so they can be taken care of. And also maybe some people who are suffering from a mental health crisis, they may not be in the mindset to receive that learning experience. So when we come out with programs to try to educate such topics, I think we should also think about how to help with that mindset shift, or like to help them come up to be ready for such an experience. Yeah, and so these are the main things that I'm thinking about. But thank you.
It's perfect to really come as full circle. Like, what are the best ways communities can come together to heal it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we kind of hit a lot of points already. Just like recognizing where you come from and who you are, and making sure that we all recognize that we're all on the same journey on healing, and that we all play a part in it. Yeah, Cherie, I agree that not everybody's in a space to go on that journey, and that's just a natural part of life. And there's for some people there's no avoiding that, and it's hard, but that's when, you know, the community is going to play a part in that, in uplifting those people so that they can be at a place to be part of healing, recognizing that we're all part of it.
Aurora, what are the best ways communities can come together to heal it?
Sing, loving yourself. Why don't we ask ourselves and each other, are you loving yourself today? Being real. You know, we can be grieving for like 30 years, and it's not until we're actually real with a moment in time, and then there's this transformation that happens as soon as we're real with what actually is. So not disassociating, being real with what actually is, saying the elephant in the room, naming it, loving yourself. You know, one of my lyrics in my song Accepting All is like, instead of saying I'm good, say something else. We go through life, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. Right? How are you? I'm good. You know, being authentic. And if we can't be authentic, ask why. Why is it not safe to be authentic in certain spaces? How can we ask for it to be safe? How can we ask for it to be a place where we can all be authentic? Because that's what we're going to need to be psychologically safe, therefore well, and a well society again, is that we've created authentic spaces. But the authentic spaces becomes the outcome after the effective process takes place. So that's the outcome to strive for. So authenticity, whatever it takes. And I love you all. And I think I'm pretty proud to say I love myself. It took me a long, long time. And, you know, with the complex trauma I had, and I really studied anthropology, but I studied the ways that different cultures heal or can be well. I studied it intensely. I practice modalities. So be open to what you may not know is possible for healing. There's so many ways for healing. What matters is it's the way that works for you. But being open to more or advocating for more. You know, when I went through my process I shared earlier, charging my abuser, I accessed a program that people in Canada can access if they're victims of violence. I advocated for why manual osteopathy works to shift trauma in the body, which oftentimes those types of things aren't covered, right? So they're true barriers for people to get ways of healing that work. But advocating for trauma-informed, using your voice, saying, no, I need a trauma-informed process here. This is what can be expected and allowed. This is what I need. And encouraging other people that don't know they have rights to ask for that, to ask for what they truly need. And I think that when we allow for healing to be not just this, like, whatever it's been thought of as, you know, this disregarded aspect, you know, oh, healing, what is that? No, when it's actually normalized that we all need to heal, we know that the average ACE score is 2. When we actually recognize that, why wouldn't we normalize that we all need a healing journey? Thank you.
So perfect. I'd just like to open the floor to some questions. So if you have a question for the panelists, any one of them, I'll leave my notes here and just come up to the mic. Need a couple little floaters here. Otherwise, I'm going to pick some people. I could actually bring the mic to you as well. I'm going to walk over there, so someone better raise their hand by the time I get there. I'm picking you.
I'm wondering, so we talk a lot about being trauma informed, and then we talk about being healing centered. So it's almost like a progression where we become aware and then we engage in the opportunity for healing. I'm wondering how we do that within the institutions and the systems that we work within. So how do those systems become more focused on allowing space for healing versus just being, and I don't know who the question's for, but versus just being focused on, like, we can be aware of trauma and we can be trauma aware, but how do we support the people we support within our systems to make those more open for people to have opportunity to heal? Does that make sense?
I'll take a stab at it. I think that, you know, when we think about our systems and we think about allowing people to, you know, we think about that trauma informed, it really, you know, like it goes right down to our little things like, how are we expecting people to fill out their forms? Is there support for that? Do they have access to get to care? Have we even checked out whether or not they have the capacity to show up? Are we supporting them right from the beginning? And I think that when we think about trauma informed, I think that that's really what we have to look at is, what are all of our barriers? And we know the big barriers of lack of service or financial. We already, you know, sort of look at those and try to identify those. But, you know, there's so many other barriers of, am I going to be accepted? Right? What's going to happen if I actually tell the truth? Are they going to take my children away? Right? Are they going to phone the police? Am I going to get fired from my job? And so, you know, we talk about, you know, thinking about, we want people to share and to heal. And that really is like, I think the way we heal is we share. We have to talk about it, right? Kind of like what Auroara said, get the elephant out of the room. But we also then have to create ways in which that can be safe for folks, and share with them the fact that we know it might not feel safe, and then do whatever we can to help understand that, you know what, there might be other barriers here that we're not looking at. And how else do we support this? Do we make, they have to fill out, you know, a 10-page questionnaire before you can even show up for the support group? And if English is your second language, or you struggle in any way of being able to do that, or even it's just scary for you to put that down because last time you wrote something on paper, it came back at you in a bad way, how do we get rid of some of those processes and say, you know what, just come on in, right? Come on in the way you are. I remember when I first showed up for my recovery, and I didn't show up very, I just showed up the way I was, and they said, come on in, and I'm forever grateful for that. And I think that's kind of where we have to start. Let people show up where they're at and support them at that level. I don't know if anyone else.
Yeah, and I think it's breaking down, like what Shirley said, is breaking down some of those barriers, but not only, walking with them and meeting them where they're at. It's kind of guiding that process. And part of that too is actually going and looking at your MLAs, looking at your government officials, and writing those letters. And I mean, I don't think enough of us are doing that. And in order for those systems to change, we really have to be aware of who we're voting in, who is on our councils, who's in our systems of government, because it's never going to change if it's the same thing and the same process going over and over again, because the system we have right now is broken. The wait lists that we have are broken. It's so incredibly broken, and we need to start from somewhere, and it needs to start with us. And so we need to evaluate where that change needs to happen.
I would add to both of yours and say, I think it starts with education and understanding, because I think that so many of us see the issues and challenges, but the way that we define them around having like a policy or definition of what trauma is, or what people may or may not struggle with, the people who are actually implementing policy, executing policy, may not have enough education or understanding to be able to implement them from a trauma-informed place anyway. So I think part of it is around really examining values, whether they're societal values in what we value, how we value it, where we put our resources, what we consider to be valid. I think that's probably the first challenge in learning how to be honest about what that actually is. Because on paper, it might say one thing, but we're practicing an entirely different way that does not align. And so while we might have the best of intentions to maybe support people with access, if we actually are not practicing that way and don't have people who are involved at both the service level for implementation as well as the access level, and don't value their input and don't value their experience to take that feedback back and make the changes to make it accessible for people, I don't even think it matters if we go up to change the policy unless there's understanding about why.
Aren't they all brilliant? I think we need to accept and admit that there's been a lot of gaslighting in our culture when people have genuine responses to a non-normal situation or something that they went through, and they have to literally diagnose themselves to get any kind of support. We have a very gaslighting system, and we need to reframe it. And we also, I think, need to understand that if we were to truly do inner child healing or inner work, or what it means to heal on the autonomic nervous system, we might not be able to work 8 to 4. These demands that we have in life to be able to just have our basic needs met, it would be a high demand to also enter a healing journey. So if we truly want to shift the culture and become a well society, we need to prioritize a complete restructure, and to be able to say, no, I need to go off of work, and that's a normal response to what I'm going through. And so it comes down to self-advocacy too, and self-love again, to really know and not gaslight yourself as well while you do it. Because the level of what is known as disorders now, and we know it's most are rooted in trauma. Well, that means that people are having a normal response to something that wasn't normal that happened to them. So stopping the gaslighting, and stopping gaslighting yourself, validating yourself, and validating each other, and loving each other. It's not just a 60s, what was it? What happened in the 60s? The peace, love thing? Yeah. No, truly normalize love and connection and make it a societal norm.
Got something to add. So I think when someone is having experiencing trauma, it might be a case whereby they hide in their shell. So they may not be openly telling you that I'm facing something, I'm going through something. So when trying to support them, say in a workplace, there must be the different ways of finding out. We can't expect them to fill up a form, a survey form. It may not be the best way because they may not fill out that form, that survey form. So I think the relationship building is a key point. If you have that community already there, like the relationship building, you understand them, they see you as a friend, right? And if they're facing anything, they are more willing to open up and let you know what they're facing, and then you can talk and chat and see how to support each other. Yeah, thank you.
So this is just sort of for everyone in general. Given that the propensity of problems in society that stem from trauma, given that the number of varieties of trauma are plethoric, and the majority of treatment systems and modalities for trauma tend to come off of textbook cookie cutter methods. They say, this site right here, this is for all mental health trauma, regardless of what it is. Call on the phone, get your appointment, come in. I mean, generally speaking, if people are looking for treatment for their trauma, they're already in the 5 to 10% of people with that trauma that have gotten to a point where they know that they need help. Lots of other people are not at a point in their lives where they are ready or willing to get that trauma addressed. Is there a means of creating a non-generalized, non-cookie cutter solution to treat trauma in general, taking into consideration all the kinds of trauma that people experience?
I think in regards to that question, I think education and educating yourselves is a key piece. Neuroscience in itself is so new, and that's something I touched base on. It's only been just over 100 years that neuroscience has really come to light, and the brain and the functions, and it's really like the depths of the universe is what I like to say, right? So you're right, like there is so many forms of trauma and what those triggers are and all those things. I think as service providers or as individuals that may walk the path with somebody who is dealing with severe trauma, is literally just walking with that person, having those discussions, and they may not be ready to open up that severe trauma, but just being a present individual in that person's life is more profound than not. And I think that we do kind of become so busy in our own lives that we almost forget about the people that are suffering, and we do need to reflect on that. And like Aurora said, our self-care as well, because if we're not taking care of ourselves, we can't actually provide that care for others. So I think it's really coming back to our own traumas and our own care, first and foremost, and then being able to give that to somebody else as well. Because we can't, just like our phone batteries, we can't call somebody or connect with anybody if our batteries are drained.
I'm going to build on that a little bit. And I think part of it is in like our overall societal understanding of harm and trauma and hurt. I feel like our society in its current state has this expectation that you experience something harmful or sad, like the death of a family member or a major illness or a traumatic event. And the expectation is, okay, you're going to be sad for a while, you're going to be hurt for a while, and then you're going to get over it. And I think that we really need to kind of address that perspective that's very colonial and very isolating in the mainstream. Trauma, I think we need to understand, is not a one-off event. If it is built into your nervous system and it's meant to be self-protective because of what you have experienced, it may very well be an ongoing process throughout your life with ebbs and flows. And so your state of health and well-being and healing is going to be ongoing throughout the rest of your life. So could we maybe shift the perspective from, why aren't you over this yet? or why are you still hanging on to this? I thought this was so long ago, to that was a really impactful event for you. It must impact your life in a whole bunch of different ways. So how do we allow you to just sit with that in its current state?
I think like what she said, the trauma, everybody experience it differently. So it's not like the way to heal from it is a very subjective. It's it's not like a one size fits all. And for example, in my culture, if I have a death of a family, we mourn for a year and we couldn't celebrate or have ceremonies to celebrate, say, a wedding for example, for a year. So I think the key, right, is to have the flexibility in allowing people to heal the way they need to heal in order to get over that trauma. So that flexibility piece.
From a medical anthropology perspective, there are so many ways of healing, and I really think about why there's stuckness. It's like a body of water. If a pond doesn't get oxygen, it grows all these microorganisms. If the water is flowing, it's a lot more free. It's a lot more clear. And where is the shame coming from? And as long as we don't name the shame of what it means to feel human emotion or what it means to work through something, then it stays there and it stays bigger than we actually think. And so I think I've been very fortunate to have known incredible healers throughout my journey, Indigenous ceremonies, spiritual healers, so many people that are connected to ways that aren't just the Western medicine way. And then Western medicine also helped me too in ways like EMDR. There's internal family systems where it's all about parts and bringing your parts back, calling your parts back. But then I could see and cross-reference cultural perspectives of healing like soul retrievals. And it's the same thing. There's cultures where they wail when they have grief, and it's normal to wail. I really needed to wail when I had grief, but I couldn't. I lived in Kelowna. I didn't feel like I could. I felt like what they could call a ministry or something. I can't just wail. I really needed to. I did create my own little ceremony to be able to go out and release. It was very natural. It's not natural to keep it all in. I think giving ourselves the permission to not be okay, actually entering and talking to the shame and saying, what am I really ashamed of here? Because shame is the hardest emotion to actually work through when you're going through the healing process. And then usually it's actually the coding before you actually enter what it is that you're ashamed of that you can heal. So shame blocks so much. And then we conversate in a shaming way sometimes, right? Like I see communities of people where they're just shaming each other, these little microaggressions, or someone starts a healing journey and they kind of tear it down a little bit, right? And they keep each other low. And shame is so powerful, and not to be scared of it. And I think that then we can really see those pillars of strength, celebrating each other. We know, like in somatic theory and practice, that celebrating one another is one of the hugest pillars for psychological safety in community. Seeing each other and celebrating each other.
And then if I can, I'll just add one more thing. I think that the other thing too that we really want to remember is that it's called a healing journey, right? Which means that there's no real end, right? And so, you know, where I can be today, who knows where I'll be next week, right? Maybe next week I'm back crying about something that happened 45 years ago. And that's okay, right? So just remembering that it's a journey. And, you know, I think the other thing that is really important that we remember is that mental health is something that we all have, just like physical health, right? And we don't expect that every single day we're physically well. Right? We just, that's not even part of human experience. We know that people are going to be unwell physically. They might catch a cold, they might get the flu, they might get a sore back, they might hurt their ankle. And we don't judge that. yet the exact same hurts can happen with our mental health and our emotional health and our spiritual health. And we're like, ooh, you shouldn't have let that happen. Right? What were you doing feeling like that? When in fact, it's something that, like it's just such a part of the human experience. And we're missing so much by not allowing ourselves to embrace that as well.
Not much of a question, but it's more of a comment. I wanted to know a little bit more about when you're healing, because the trauma is something that happened to you, but it's more effective if you understand what happened inside of you. So when people it's not about telling the story. It's not about that. It's about understanding physiologically, mentally, emotionally, what happened to you after or during that episode, whatever it is. And then those physiologies play out in other means. Understanding that belonging, if you feel like you belong somewhere, that will help you understand, to help you heal it, to feel that you're connected, that you have a community of support around you. So if you put them all together, then you get somewhere. I'm sorry I don't have a voice today.
Oh, I think you have a beautiful voice.
So you've mentioned a couple of times that you feel that everybody should go on a healing journey, or everyone can benefit from a healing journey. But I don't think a lot of people recognize that they have anything to heal, or they might be denying it. What would you say to anybody, like the I'm good people, to help them recognize that there's something inside of them that needs to heal when they feel like that doesn't exist?
I would say, who hurt you? Probably would be my first question. I think it's really complicated, right? So you might need to wait until you are ready to be on your own healing journey. And I think that's a process of acceptance in and of itself. And then I think it comes into kind of understanding your perspective and position in the world and how you understand yourself and where you fit and the systems that you fit into. And why do you think that way? And being curious and asking questions about that. I don't think currently in our society we do a very good job of that. We've got lots of room for improvement in being curious about ourselves and our perspectives. And that might be enough to start challenging that. So how do we do that? One of the things some of my colleagues and I have been working on is kind of understanding our own positionality in the world, asking questions about where we've come from, and then modeling that as well with the newer and up and coming nurses, and asking questions about, why do you think this? Where do you come from? What allows you to be that way? Where's your power? Where's your privilege? What's allowed that to be so for you? How do you understand things as they are? Why do you understand them? What are your biases? Where do those come from? And really starting to challenge them to dig in a little bit and allow them the space to explore and mess up and learn, and to feel safe in that, to allow them to start to change and grow.
I think that great question, amazing. I'm like, what is it? What do I want to say? Freedom and suppression. I mean, constriction is fear, right? Love is openness. I think that I really learned this through the time when I was a doula and supporting women in childbirth, and knowing that fear constricted during labor and love opened during labor. But that's true too for our healing journey. So I would ask that person, where do you feel constriction? If you never feel constriction anywhere and you feel free everywhere, you're blessed. It's beautiful. But then I would just say, where do you feel constriction and why? And start to look there with a loving, compassionate, curious space. Because in our autonomic nervous system, we can't hold fear and curiosity at the same time. When we choose to bring curiosity, maybe even loving kindness to that fear and constriction, it will soften. Even if it's hard and takes a long time, even if you start and you ebb and flow just as you're ready. But yeah, that's what I would say to them.
And I sort of also would just sort of understand it's okay. It's okay if you're not ready. It's okay if you can't see it. I couldn't see it for a long time. I could only see it when I was ready to see it. And really, people telling me it wasn't all that helpful, right? Really, what was helpful was like, oh, look at your life, man. How did you get that? Right. And not like stuff. I don't mean stuff. I mean, being able to see that there were healthy people and wanting that. Right. And then being curious and having people that would share what they did with me. And I think that, wherever we are, that's just where we're at. Right. And we all have our own journey and we all have to work through it in our own way. And I think that as soon as we start to educate people too, I think education is another really big part of it, and not education in the sense of this is what you need to do, but that education in the sense that sometimes we see only what we know. Right. And if we've never seen anything else, how do we even know that there is anything else? I used to tease and say, the bar is so low for me. Right. But for a lot of that was I didn't actually have realistic examples of what a higher bar could actually look like. And so, having the opportunity just to have people around me that were modeling something different. And that was I think that sometimes is a big place where we start to, right? No judgment, no nothing, just living our own best life. And then other people sometimes are like, hey, how do I get to live my own best life too then? And we just bring them along, right? Meet them where they're at and then bring them over.
In my position as peer support, I see that a lot with people not recognizing or denying it, which is normal. It's a normal part of life, and especially growing up. And I think for me, what I've noticed has been like transformational for a person in recognizing their own trauma and their own healing journey is just being their friend, just being there. And it doesn't even have to be pointing out their own biases or, whatever it might be, but just being at their friend and being with them during their, teaching them life skills or watching a movie with them or going for a walk. It can be really basic things. Just being their friend, I think, has been really transformational for people in recognizing that there is something to be healing, to be healed from. Yeah, just being their friend. Yeah.
I agree with Lake. I think self-awareness is a skill that is that needs to be learned. So like if, for example, if we can have young people learning this skill of self-awareness, that's very important. But also for the people who, the I'm good people, it's good to maybe think of it in a different perspective. If you are blessed enough to be good or feel good, maybe to think of others who may need help. So maybe think of like, oh, I may not need to heal, but I think maybe others need, and maybe how can I help them? Like, and in helping others, you might learn a few things about yourself as well.
For myself, like it's the small steps of contributing to that journey. Not the expectation of huge leaps. I think a lot of people want to jump to that healing journey really quickly, but it's really small incremental steps. And sometimes we're going to have steps backwards. Something's going to trigger us or something's going to happen and we have to self-reflect on that. And it's allowing that room for those people that we are working with or we are, friends with or whoever, to be able to cry, to be able to have that safe space to make those steps forward and kind of being their cheerleader from the background. And sometimes it's even like having little things, somebody who might be a hoarder, just throwing out like that one little thing right? And kind of going through that process with them. And that I think a big thing is connectedness. Connection is such a huge thing, like you said. We lack that connection. I think in this generation today, connection is something that is becoming lost, and we need to bring back connection in all cultures, every single culture. In past history, connection with our families, with friends, with community was a big thing, and we're losing the connection with each other. And yes, we have connection through technology, but it's not the same. That connection we need, that's in person, that's vital. It's so needed. That doing group, I think one of my biggest things is group work, and allowing people that safe place to be able to do those things. But it's that connection. And I think Shirley said, like being a part of, like, you don't until you're ready, you're not going to connect with people. But when you are ready, that it's kind of like a aha moment, as Oprah would say. And I think that is that reflection, right? And once we have that, and we have more of that connected piece, we'll start to heal. That's when people start to really heal.
Just quickly before probably the final question I see Penelope has, and then cognizant of the time for everyone's evening, but 80% of the time transformation doesn't happen until there's a crisis. So say for instance, like 20% of the time, maybe someone consciously chooses, I want a healing journey. But 80% of the time it's, someone maybe has a near-death experience, a car accident. Now they're vulnerable. Now there's a power authority over their well-being. Now they have a freeze response or a fawn response, or they don't know why they feel that way. And then they have to dig deep. Then they have to learn their attachment style if they choose to. Maybe they're totally struggling. They have cancer treatment that makes them feel so vulnerable and brings up all their trauma. Then they're facing it. Most of the time, maybe they're lucky because they get to be around it all the time. Maybe they get certain cultural practices, teaching, stories, and they're very blessed to have those and grow up around those and be embedded in that in the culture. But for the common North American experience of being shut down, don't express too much emotion or we'll treat you like you're crazy, for the normal standard demographic, it has to come through a crisis, which we don't need it to be. We can consciously choose that and celebrate it and normalize it.
I've been in a long journey of healing, and I think part of too is being able to step outside of that and assist others. When you're inside of the hurricane, it's a beautiful day. You look up, you got a blue sky. You don't even know you're in a storm until someone hands you that, hey, your life looks a little bit in a wreck. So I think my question is, one of the books that really assisted me was with Eckhart Tolle, right? Be in the presence. So that's my question. What was the book that assisted you to be on this journey right now?
Marianne Williamson, A Return to Love, 100%.
For me, it was the 4 Agreements, which Penelope actually introduced me to.
I think it's a combination of things. There is a really good book called Attached that talks about attachment styles. And I had read a very small writing piece called You're Not Crazy, It's Your Mother, which was like, oh, I'm not alone. Okay, well, that's good to know. I thought it was me. And then from there, there's a wonderful YouTube video. Of course, I've forgotten her name now, but it's all about ACEs. And it is so powerful and so transformational, and a way to just look at traumatic experiences differently and the impacts on health and how prevalent they are. That makes me a very passionate advocate to not only normalize this conversation, to make sure that there's education, make sure people feel seen and heard in those experiences, and then empowered to try to help prevent them.
I remember when I was in my 20s, I read a book called To Be or Not to Be, and I forgot the author. It's about a bee and how he go through his life journey and how he saw itself in relation to the community and the world. So maybe if you Google to be, like TO and BEE, like to be or not to be BEE, that's a really good book.
And I think for me, I have been an avid reader, and I can't think of sort of a number. The first book, I just can't think of what it might have been. One that just sort of really comes to mind for me today is Brene Brown, The Gifts of Imperfection. Right, that one was really an opening up for me to allow myself to start looking in a gentle way. And then there's another big old blue book that has been very influential in my life as well.
Sorry, I got one more book to add because you mentioned about the presence. So if you know Thich Nhat Hanh, the monk in Vietnam, I think he writes a lot of books like in Peace with Every Breath or Every Step. Those are good books as well.
Yeah, I'm also an avid reader, but I don't. I read more fictional, like sci-fi stuff. I'm gonna sit here and think about a book that's relevant, I guess. I have a few. There was one that's a bibliography. It's called "I'm Glad My Mom Died." It's by Samantha. I can't remember her last name right this second, but she was a child star to a child actor to Nickelodeon, and her mother was an abuser. And she speaks about that in her book. And I think it was one of many books that sort of outlined the problem with Hollywood and how it treats child actors. And you don't, when I was growing up watching those shows, you don't see that, you don't recognize that. And I think, yeah, reading that book changed my life. It made me recognize a lot of problems that I would have never understood or been able to experience myself. Just helped me understand things in a more rounded way.
Wow, how do we do a closing after all of that? You know, you come here today and we're talking about humility, equity, anti-racism, lateral kindness, inclusivity, and trauma-informed. But the conversation naturally went to the underbelly of it all, right? And you witnessed it yourself here. And you can see those common threads in the episodes as well, but that truly is the underbelly. And I had the opportunity to present a workshop for 90 policymakers in Public Health Canada, and not one of them had heard of the ACE study. Not one of them had that trauma-informed knowledge that's now substantiated to see the correlation of health outcomes due to trauma. What is it that we need? We need policymakers and leaders to be trauma-informed. Or we need trauma experts to be in those roles, right? And to do those and to do that work, because that's what it all really does come down to at this point and where we are at in human society and civilization. And thanks for all being present, and feel free to mingle if you need to, or go if you need to. But I appreciate you all in sharing in this brave journey and courageous conversations, and truly embodying what it means to have vulnerable conversations and share space together in community. Thank you.